On a fateful Sunday morning in the Pacific, December 7, 1941, the tranquility of a tropical paradise was shattered by the roar of aircraft engines and the deafening boom of explosions. The United States naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, found itself under a surprise attack from the forces of the Empire of Japan. This devastating assault, which President Franklin D. Roosevelt would famously declare as a date which will live in infamy, marked the beginning of America's entry into World War II. But what led to this catastrophic event, and how did it forever change the course of history? From the meticulous planning and execution of the Japanese military to the courageous acts of valor displayed by American servicemen and women amidst the chaos, the attack on Pearl Harbor stands as a chilling testament to the brutality and unpredictability of war. As Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the attack, ominously observed, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." Join us as we delve into the harrowing details of that tragic day and explore the stories of heroism, sacrifice, and devastation that unfolded in the face of an unprecedented act of aggression. Welcome to the Diary of Julius Caesar. The road to infamy, tensions and turmoil before the Pearl Harbor attack. In the years leading up to the infamous attack on Pearl Harbor, a complex web of political and economic tensions simmered between the United States and Japan. The rising sun of Japan's imperial ambitions cast a dark shadow across the Pacific as it sought to expand its territories in Asia. The conquest of China and the invasion of Manchuria in 1931 marked the beginning of Japan's aggressive expansion, and the international community, including the United States, took notice. The US viewed Japan's military actions with growing unease, and by the late 1930s, relations between the two nations began to deteriorate. The US government, led by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, was determined to maintain a balance of power in the Pacific and curb Japanese aggression. As a result, the United States implemented a series of increasingly restrictive trade policies aimed at stymieing Japan's war efforts. One such measure was the passage of the Neutrality Acts in the 1930s, which placed limitations on arms sales and loans to countries at war. These acts not only affected Japan, but also European countries involved in the growing conflict that would eventually become World War II. However, the tipping point came in 1940 when the US banned the export of scrap iron and steel to Japan. This move significantly impacted Japan's military production, as the country heavily relied on imported raw materials to fuel its war machine. The situation escalated further in July 1941 when the United States, along with the United Kingdom and the Netherlands, imposed an oil embargo on Japan. This embargo was a direct response to Japan's occupation of French Indochina, a move that threatened British and Dutch interests in the region. The embargo proved to be a severe blow to Japan, as the country relied on imported oil to power its navy and air force. With oil reserves dwindling, Japan faced a stark choice: either abandon its imperial ambitions or risk running out of the resources needed to wage war. As diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis floundered, Japan's leaders, including Prime Minister Hideki Tojo and Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, began to contemplate a daring and audacious plan. The plan, designed to cripple the US Pacific Fleet and buy Japan the time it needed to consolidate its territorial gains, would lead to one of the most notorious surprise attacks in history. During this period of escalating tensions, there were numerous attempts to resolve the conflict peacefully. Cordell Hull, the US Secretary of State, and Kichisaburo Nomura, the Japanese ambassador to the United States, engaged in protracted negotiations to find a diplomatic solution to the crisis. However, as these talks continued, the gulf between the two sides widened, and the likelihood of a peaceful resolution became increasingly remote. A famous quote from Admiral Yamamoto, the architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, illustrates the sense of desperation that had taken hold of Japan's leaders. He reportedly said, "I shall run wild considerably for the first 6 months or a year, but I have utterly no confidence for the second or third year." Yamamoto, who had spent time in the United States and understood its industrial might, was well aware of the risks involved in taking on such a formidable adversary. Operation Z, the masterful deception of Pearl Harbor's assault. As tensions between the United States and Japan reached a boiling point, the Japanese government decided to execute a bold and daring plan that would alter the course of history. This meticulously crafted plan, known as Operation Z, aimed to deliver a devastating blow to the US Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. Orchestrated by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, this operation would test the limits of Japanese military prowess and strategic planning. To achieve the element of surprise, the Japanese Navy assembled a formidable task force comprising 6 aircraft carriers: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, along with a host of support vessels. This fleet, commanded by Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, set sail from the Kuril Islands on November 26, 1941, under strict radio silence, maintaining utmost secrecy. The attack on Pearl Harbor would be carried out by a combined force of over 350 aircraft, including fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes. The selection of targets was critical to the success of the operation. The Japanese planners knew that to cripple the US Pacific Fleet, they had to focus on sinking the 8 American battleships moored at Pearl Harbor, particularly the USS Arizona, California, and Oklahoma. Additionally, they aimed to destroy the aircraft carriers stationed in the area, although, fortuitously for the United States, the carriers were not present on the day of the attack. Airfields, hangars, and other strategic installations were also part of the target list to ensure that the American air power in the Pacific was severely weakened. To maximize the effectiveness of their assault, the Japanese relied on innovative tactics and technology. They modified their torpedoes by fitting them with wooden fins, allowing them to run shallow in the harbor's waters, thereby increasing their chances of striking the American battleships. The Japanese also used armor-piercing bombs, which were designed to penetrate the thick armor of the US vessels before detonating. A crucial aspect of Operation Z was the gathering of intelligence. Japanese spies such as Takeo Yoshikawa worked diligently to collect information on the movements and disposition of American forces at Pearl Harbor. Under the cover of working as a consulate official, Yoshikawa observed ship movements and reported his findings back to Tokyo. His reports played a vital role in fine-tuning the details of the attack plan. Yamamoto's strategy hinged on the element of surprise. To keep the Americans off guard, the Japanese presented a facade of ongoing diplomatic negotiations in Washington, D.C. up until the very last moment. The Japanese also held extensive training exercises and rehearsals to ensure that their pilots were well prepared for the complex aerial assault. The attack commenced on the morning of December 7, 1941, at 7:48 a.m. Hawaii time. In 2 waves of aerial assault, the Japanese pilots swooped down on the unsuspecting American forces, wreaking havoc on the ships and installations in the harbor. Though the attack lasted less than 2 hours, the devastation was immense. Over 2,400 Americans lost their lives, and the majority of the US Pacific Fleet's battleships were either sunk or heavily damaged. Despite the destruction inflicted on the US Pacific Fleet, the attack on Pearl Harbor was not an unmitigated success for the Japanese. They failed to locate and destroy the American aircraft carriers, and the repair facilities and fuel storage tanks remained largely untouched. These oversights would later prove crucial to the United States' ability to rebuild and retaliate. Day of Infamy, the unfolding of the Pearl Harbor assault. The sun rose over the island of Oahu on December 7, 1941, revealing a tranquil Sunday morning in Hawaii. Little did the American servicemen at Pearl Harbor know that just a few miles away, a devastating surprise attack was about to unfold. The meticulously planned Japanese assault would bring destruction and chaos to the unsuspecting US Pacific Fleet, changing the course of history forever. The first wave of Japanese aircraft, consisting of 183 planes, took off from their carriers under the command of Commander Mitsuo Fuchida. As they approached the island, they encountered minimal resistance, allowing them to maintain the element of surprise. As the clock struck 7:48 a.m. Hawaii time, Fuchida gave the order to attack with the historic command, "Tora, Tora, Tora," signaling that complete surprise had been achieved. The first wave targeted the 8 American battleships moored along Battleship Row, with particular attention paid to the USS Arizona, California, and Oklahoma. Torpedo bombers swooped in low, releasing their modified torpedoes, which sped through the shallow harbor waters towards their targets. Simultaneously, high-level bombers dropped armor-piercing bombs, aiming to penetrate the thick armor of the U.S. vessels before detonating. Caught off guard, the American forces scrambled to defend their fleet. Despite their best efforts, the first wave of the attack left a trail of destruction in its wake. The USS Arizona, struck by a bomb, erupted in a massive explosion that claimed the lives of 1,177 crewmen. The Oklahoma, having sustained multiple torpedo hits, rolled over and sank, trapping hundreds of sailors inside. As the first wave of attackers withdrew, a second wave of 171 Japanese aircraft, led by Lieutenant Commander Shigekazu Shimazaki, commenced their assault. This wave focused on the remaining ships and installations, including airfields and hangars. The fighters strafed the airfields, targeting parked aircraft to prevent any counterattacks from the American pilots. Throughout the attack, American servicemen and civilians displayed remarkable acts of courage and resourcefulness. One such example was Doris "Dory" Miller, a mess attendant aboard the USS West Virginia. Despite having no formal combat training, Miller manned an anti-aircraft gun, shooting down at least one Japanese plane during the attack. His bravery would later earn him the Navy Cross, making him the first African American to receive the prestigious award. The attack concluded in less than 2 hours, leaving behind a scene of devastation. More than 2,400 Americans had lost their lives, and another 1,100 were injured. The majority of the U.S. Pacific Fleet's battleships were either sunk or heavily damaged, with the Arizona, Oklahoma, and West Virginia suffering the most severe fates. In the aftermath of the attack, President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered his famous Day of Infamy speech to the nation, stating, "December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The following day, the United States declared war on Japan, marking its entry into World War II." Blindsided, the intelligence puzzle that preceded Pearl Harbor. In the aftermath of the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, questions arose as to how the United States had been caught so off guard by the Japanese assault. Despite some warning signs, American intelligence failed to piece together the clues that could have alerted them to the impending danger. This lapse in intelligence gathering would become one of the most scrutinized aspects of the Pearl Harbor story. The United States had been monitoring Japanese diplomatic and military communications throughout the lead-up to the attack. The cryptanalysts at the Signal Intelligence Service had broken the Japanese diplomatic code, known as Purple, and were intercepting and deciphering messages between Tokyo and its embassies. However, the sheer volume of intercepted messages, along with the need for translation and analysis, meant that many messages were not immediately read or understood. Furthermore, the focus of American intelligence was primarily on Japanese diplomatic communications, leaving naval communications relatively unexplored. The Japanese Navy used a separate code, known as JN-25, which was only partially deciphered by the Americans. This oversight meant that crucial information about the movements and plans of the Japanese fleet remained hidden from the U.S. intelligence community. In the months leading up to the attack, there were several notable incidents that, in hindsight, should have raised alarm bells. One such incident occurred on November 22, 1941, when British intelligence intercepted a message from Tokyo to the Japanese consul in Honolulu, requesting information on the locations of American warships in the harbor. Despite sharing this information with their American counterparts, the significance of the message was not fully appreciated at the time. Another missed warning sign came on November 29th, when Secretary of State Cordell Hull received a decrypted Japanese diplomatic message known as the Winds Execute message. The message instructed Japanese diplomats to destroy their code machines and burn confidential documents in the event of a breakdown in diplomatic relations. While this message indicated the likelihood of war, it did not provide specific information on the timing or location of a potential attack. In the days leading up to December 7th, the US military also detected unusual naval activity in the Pacific. On December 2nd, the minesweeper USS Condor spotted a periscope off the coast of Oahu, which was later identified as belonging to a Japanese midget submarine. On December 6th, the cargo ship USS Antares reported a suspicious object in the water, prompting the destroyer USS Ward to investigate. The Ward eventually sank a Japanese midget submarine attempting to enter Pearl Harbor. Despite these incidents, the US military did not interpret them as evidence of an imminent large-scale attack. On the morning of December 7th, the radar station at Opana Point on Oahu detected a large group of aircraft approaching the island. The operators reported their findings to the information center at Fort Shafter, but the sighting was dismissed as a flight of American B-17 bombers expected to arrive from the mainland. The failure to anticipate the attack on Pearl Harbor can be attributed to a combination of factors, including an underestimation of Japanese capabilities and intentions, a focus on the wrong sources of intelligence, and the inability to recognize warning signs. These shortcomings in American intelligence would serve as a painful lesson, highlighting the need for improved information gathering and analysis during times of heightened global tensions. A nation roused. The tides of war turn after Pearl Harbor. In the hours following the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, a wave of shock and disbelief swept across the United States. The tranquil Sunday morning had been shattered by the roar of Japanese aircraft and the thunderous explosions of torpedoes and bombs. As the smoke cleared and the extent of the destruction became apparent, the American public was left reeling, and the nation's leaders were forced to confront the reality that the United States was now irrevocably involved in the global conflict that was World War II. President Franklin D. Roosevelt immediately convened an emergency meeting of his cabinet and military advisors. As they discussed the implications of the attack and the appropriate response, it became clear that the United States could no longer remain on the sidelines. The very next day, on December 8, 1941, Roosevelt delivered his famous Day of Infamy speech to a joint session of Congress in which he recounted the events of the attack and called for a declaration of war against Japan. In his stirring address, he proclaimed, "No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory." With the president's impassioned speech still ringing in their ears, Congress quickly voted to declare war on Japan. The lone dissenting vote came from Representative Jeannette Rankin, the first woman elected to Congress and a lifelong pacifist. Her unpopular stance was met with widespread criticism, but she remained steadfast in her opposition to war, stating, "As a woman, I can't go to war, and I refuse to send anyone else." The United States' entry into the war had an immediate and profound impact on the nation as a whole. The economy, which had been struggling to recover from the Great Depression, was suddenly jolted into action as factories and industries shifted their focus to the production of war material. From shipyards to airplane factories, the American workforce was mobilized on an unprecedented scale to support the war effort. Rosie the Riveter, a cultural icon representing the millions of women who joined the workforce during the war, became a symbol of female empowerment and the resilience of the American spirit. The attack on Pearl Harbor also sparked a renewed sense of patriotism and unity among the American people. Thousands of young men and women flocked to enlist in the armed forces, eager to defend their country and avenge the losses at Pearl Harbor. The attack had effectively galvanized the nation, transforming it from a state of isolationism to one of unwavering determination. However, the aftermath of the attack was not without its darker moments. In the weeks that followed, anti-Japanese sentiment reached a fever pitch, culminating in the forced internment of over 120,000 Japanese Americans. The majority of these individuals were US citizens who had committed no crimes but were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in internment camps solely based on their ethnicity. This shameful chapter in American history serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of wartime hysteria and the need to protect the rights and freedoms of all citizens, regardless of their ancestry. The impact of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the subsequent entry of the United States into World War II cannot be overstated. The events of December 7, 1941, changed the course of the war and the trajectory of the nation, ultimately leading to the defeat of the Axis powers and the establishment of the United States as a global superpower. Veiled vision, the enigma of willful blindness in the Pearl Harbor conspiracy. The attack on Pearl Harbor not only marked a turning point in world history, but also gave rise to a myriad of conspiracy theories. Among these theories is the notion of willing blindness, which posits that President Franklin D. Roosevelt and other high-ranking US officials knew about the impending attack but chose to let it happen in order to galvanize public support for entering World War II. Advocates of this theory point to several pieces of circumstantial evidence in support of their claims. They argue that intercepted Japanese communications, such as the "Winds Execute" message mentioned earlier, provided ample warning of an imminent attack. Some even assert that the US had cracked the Japanese naval code JN-25 and knew about the specifics of the attack well in advance. They also highlight the fact that key American warships, including the aircraft carriers USS Enterprise and USS Lexington, were conveniently absent from Pearl Harbor at the time of the attack, suggesting that these valuable assets had been purposefully spared from destruction. Those who subscribe to the willing blindness theory contend that Roosevelt and his advisors saw war with Japan as inevitable and believed that an unprovoked attack on American soil would rally the country behind the war effort. In their view, the US government deliberately turned a blind eye to the warning signs in order to provoke a response from the American public. However, numerous historians and scholars have debunked the willing blindness conspiracy theory, arguing that it relies on selective interpretation of facts and ignores the broader context of the events leading up to the attack. Many experts maintain that while the US had indeed intercepted and decoded Japanese diplomatic messages, the information gleaned from these communications was not specific enough to predict the time, location, or nature of the attack. Additionally, the argument that the US had cracked the JN-25 code prior to the attack has been largely discredited. While American cryptanalysts had made some progress in breaking the code, they had not yet fully deciphered it at the time of the attack. As a result, the US intelligence community was unable to access crucial information regarding the Japanese fleet's movements and intentions. The absence of American aircraft carriers from Pearl Harbor during the attack can also be explained by routine naval operations. The USS Enterprise and USS Lexington were both engaged in separate missions at the time, ferrying aircraft to outlying islands in the Pacific. Their absence from the harbor was simply a matter of coincidence, rather than an orchestrated effort to protect valuable military assets. Furthermore, it is important to consider the implications of the willing blindness theory. If true, it would mean that the president and his advisors were complicit in sacrificing thousands of American lives and deliberately inviting a devastating attack on US soil. Such a decision would have been an extraordinary breach of trust and a profound betrayal of the American people. While the willing blindness conspiracy theory continues to capture the imagination of some, the overwhelming majority of historians and experts agree that it lacks credible evidence and does not stand up to rigorous scrutiny. Unsung valor, tales of bravery amidst the chaos of Pearl Harbor. During the catastrophic attack on Pearl Harbor, countless servicemen and civilians displayed extraordinary courage and resourcefulness. These stories of heroism serve as poignant reminders of the resilience and determination exhibited by ordinary individuals in the face of adversity. One such tale of valor is that of Doris "Dory" Miller, a Navy cook aboard the USS West Virginia. Despite having no formal combat training, Miller sprang into action when the attack began. He helped move his injured captain to safety and then manned an anti-aircraft gun, firing at the incoming Japanese planes until he ran out of ammunition. For his bravery, Miller became the first African American to receive the Navy Cross, the third highest honor awarded by the U.S. Navy. Another remarkable story is that of John Finn, a chief petty officer stationed at Kaneohe Bay Naval Air Station. Finn was at home with his wife when the attack began, but he immediately raced to the airfield. Despite suffering numerous shrapnel wounds, Finn manned a .50 caliber machine gun and continued to engage enemy aircraft for over 2 hours. For his extraordinary courage, Finn was awarded the Medal of Honor, becoming the first of 15 recipients for actions during the attack on Pearl Harbor. The USS Arizona also bore witness to acts of heroism. Lieutenant Commander Samuel G. Fuqua, the ship's damage control officer, survived the initial explosion and found himself on the ship's deck amidst the chaos. Despite being injured, Fuqua took charge and organized the evacuation of survivors, directing them to abandon ship and swim to safety. He continued to search for trapped crew members until the ship's ammunition threatened to explode. Fuqua's actions saved countless lives, earning him the Medal of Honor. Civilians also displayed extraordinary bravery during the attack. One such individual was civilian shipyard worker Julio de Castro, who was working near the USS Nevada when the attack commenced. De Castro courageously assisted in the evacuation of sailors from the damaged battleship and helped prevent the spread of fires by cutting mooring lines. He continued to fight fires and evacuate personnel throughout the day, even after suffering severe burns. For his selfless efforts, De Castro received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism. Another civilian who demonstrated exceptional resourcefulness was Army nurse Annie Fox. Stationed at Hickam Field Hospital, Fox was responsible for directing medical care during the attack. Despite the chaos and danger, she calmly and efficiently coordinated the treatment of wounded servicemen, ensuring that the most critically injured received priority care. Fox's actions earned her the Purple Heart, making her the first woman to receive the award during World War II. A dark chapter, the internment of Japanese Americans amidst wartime fears. In the wake of the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, a climate of fear and suspicion gripped the United States. One of the most controversial decisions arising from this period was the forced relocation and internment of Japanese Americans living on the West Coast. This dark chapter in American history serves as a cautionary tale of how fear can lead to the erosion of civil liberties and the mistreatment of innocent citizens. The internment of Japanese Americans began in February 1942, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. The order authorized the relocation of anyone considered a potential threat to national security. While the order did not specifically target Japanese Americans, it ultimately led to the forced removal of approximately 120,000 individuals of Japanese descent, 2/3 of whom were American citizens. One of the driving forces behind this decision was Lieutenant General John L. DeWitt, who was in charge of the Western Defense Command. DeWitt believed that Japanese Americans posed a significant threat to national security, and he was influential in the implementation of the relocation program. In a series of letters and reports to his superiors, DeWitt argued that the very fact that no sabotage has taken place to date is a disturbing and confirming indication that such action will be taken. The internment process was carried out swiftly and with little regard for the rights of those affected. Families were given only a few days' notice to sell their homes and possessions, often at a fraction of their true value. They were then transported to temporary assembly centers before being moved to one of 10 internment camps scattered across the country. These camps were located in desolate areas, surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards. Life in the internment camps was challenging, with cramped living quarters, insufficient medical care, and a lack of privacy. Despite these hardships, Japanese Americans displayed remarkable resilience and resourcefulness. They established schools, hospitals, and community organizations within the camps, striving to maintain a sense of normalcy and dignity amidst their confinement. One notable individual who experienced internment firsthand was actor George Takei, best known for his role as Hikaru Sulu on the original Star Trek television series. Takei was just 5 years old when his family was forcibly removed from their Los Angeles home and sent to live in an internment camp. Years later, Takei would use his celebrity status to raise awareness about the internment experience, sharing his family's story in a TED Talk and even creating a Broadway musical, Allegiance, based on their experiences. In 1944, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the internment in the landmark case Korematsu v. United States, a decision that remains controversial to this day. It was not until 1988 that President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, formally apologizing for the internment and providing reparations to surviving Japanese-American internees. During the signing ceremony, Reagan acknowledged the grave injustice committed against Japanese Americans, stating, "Here, we admit a wrong. Here, we reaffirm our commitment as a nation to equal justice under the law." Winds of change, Pearl Harbor's lasting impact on U.S. military strategy. The attack on Pearl Harbor not only thrust the United States into World War II, but it also had a profound and lasting impact on the nation's military strategy. The lessons learned from the devastating assault forever altered the way the US approached warfare, particularly in terms of naval and air power and the necessity of a global focus. As the United States military re-evaluated its strengths and vulnerabilities, the strategic landscape shifted dramatically in the years following the attack. One significant outcome of the attack was the increased emphasis on aircraft carriers and air power. The Japanese had demonstrated the devastating potential of carrier-based aircraft during the assault on Pearl Harbor. As the US Navy recovered from its losses, it became apparent that the future of naval warfare would be dominated by the versatility and reach of aircraft carriers. This shift in focus led to the development of new tactics and technologies designed to maximize the effectiveness of carrier-based aviation. For instance, the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942 marked the first naval engagement in history where opposing ships never came within sight of one another. Instead, aircraft launched from carriers played a decisive role in the battle. This demonstrated the importance of air power in naval warfare, and the US Navy quickly adapted to this new reality. By the end of World War II, the United States had constructed a formidable fleet of aircraft carriers, which would become the cornerstone of its naval power for decades to come. The attack on Pearl Harbor also served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of American shores. In response, the US military began investing in a more extensive and sophisticated defense network, including early warning systems and radar technology. The development of these capabilities was essential in protecting against potential threats, and they played a crucial role in detecting and tracking enemy movements during the conflict. One notable figure who helped shape the future of US military strategy was Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, who took command of the Pacific Fleet shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Nimitz was a strong advocate for the use of naval and air power, and his leadership was instrumental in the US Navy's strategic shift during the war. He oversaw critical victories in the Pacific Theater, such as the Battle of Midway, which marked a turning point in the war and established American naval dominance in the region. Furthermore, the attack on Pearl Harbor served as a catalyst for the United States to adopt a more global perspective in its military strategy. The realization that the country could no longer afford to focus solely on regional threats led to the establishment of a more robust and far-reaching military presence. This shift was reflected in the development of new alliances, such as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and the establishment of military bases around the world to project American power and deter potential adversaries. An example of this global outlook can be found in the words of General George C. Marshall, who served as the Chief of Staff of the United States Army during World War II. In a 1943 speech, Marshall emphasized the importance of a global perspective, stating, "We are determined that before the sun sets on this terrible struggle, our flag will be recognized throughout the world as a symbol of freedom on the one hand and of overwhelming force on the other." In the years following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States military underwent significant changes in both strategy and technology. The increased focus on naval and air power, coupled with the adoption of a more global perspective, laid the groundwork for the nation's military posture throughout the 20th century and beyond. The attack on Pearl Harbor not only marked a turning point in American history, but also served as a catalyst for the evolution of the United States military into the powerful and far-reaching force it is today. Echoes of valor, commemorating Pearl Harbor's legacy and sacrifice. The attack on Pearl Harbor left an indelible mark on the collective memory of the United States, and the lives lost on that fateful day have been remembered and honored through various memorials and commemorations. These tributes not only serve as a testament to the sacrifices made, but also as a reminder of the lessons learned from the attack, ensuring that the events of December 7, 1941 continue to resonate through the generations. One of the most iconic memorials dedicated to the victims of the Pearl Harbor attack is the USS Arizona Memorial, which was established on May 30, 1962. Designed by architect Alfred Price, the striking white structure spans the sunken hull of the battleship USS Arizona, where over 1,100 sailors and Marines lost their lives. The memorial is accessible only by boat, and as visitors approach, the solemnity and reverence of the site become palpable. Once inside, the names of the fallen are inscribed on a marble wall, a poignant tribute to the lives cut short on that tragic day. The USS Arizona is not the only memorial at Pearl Harbor. The USS Utah Memorial, dedicated in 1972, honors the crew of the battleship Utah, which was also sunk during the attack. The USS Oklahoma Memorial, unveiled in 2007, commemorates the 429 sailors and Marines who perished when the ship capsized. Additionally, the USS Bowfin Submarine Museum and Park and the Battleship Missouri Memorial pay tribute to the broader naval history of World War II, serving as reminders of the crucial role played by the U.S. Navy during the conflict. Pearl Harbor Day, observed annually on December 7th, is a national day of remembrance that honors the lives lost and the courage displayed during the attack. Across the country, ceremonies, moments of silence, and other commemorations take place to pay tribute to the fallen and the survivors. The National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day commemoration, held each year at the Pearl Harbor Visitor Center in Hawaii, is a solemn event attended by survivors, veterans, and dignitaries. The ceremony often includes speeches, wreath-laying, a 21-gun salute, and a moment of silence at 7:55 a.m., the exact time the attack began. The impact of the attack on Pearl Harbor extended beyond the United States, and international efforts to remember and honor the events of that day have taken various forms. In 2016, on the 75th anniversary of the attack, Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visited the USS Arizona Memorial alongside then US President Barack Obama. This historic visit marked the first time a sitting Japanese leader had visited the site, and the gesture of reconciliation demonstrated the power of remembrance in fostering peace and understanding between former adversaries. Beyond the memorials and ceremonies, the legacy of Pearl Harbor has been immortalized through various forms of art, literature, and film. Movies such as Tora Tora Tora, 1970, and Pearl Harbor, 2001, have brought the events of December 7th to life for millions of viewers, while books like At Dawn We Slept by Gordon W. Prang and Day of Infamy by Walter Lord have provided detailed accounts of the attack and its aftermath. The many commemorations and memorials dedicated to Pearl Harbor serve as a constant reminder of the sacrifices made and the lessons learned from the events of December 7th, 1941. Through these tributes, the legacy of those who perished and the courage of the survivors continue to echo through the generations, ensuring that the memory of Pearl Harbor remains a vital part of the American story. As we conclude our journey through the pivotal moments and lasting impacts of the Pearl Harbor attack, let us remember the bravery and sacrifice displayed by countless individuals who faced adversity with courage and resolve. The echoes of December 7th, 1941 continue to reverberate through the annals of history, shaping our understanding of the past and guiding us towards a more hopeful future. In the words of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, "Those who have long enjoyed such privileges as we enjoy forget in time that men have died to win them." May we never forget the sacrifices made at Pearl Harbor, and let their legacy inspire us to strive for peace, understanding, and unity. Thank you for joining us on this voyage through time, as we explored the heroes, the heartache, and the enduring lessons of Pearl Harbor.